Good morning, everyone. It is great to finally be here. I think D-Congress invited me 2 years ago, so it's great to finally be with you to talk about trust, a really big word and something that has become even more important in our lives over the last 2 years. So what I'd love to do with our time together is to help you think differently about trust, to really understand what it is and why it's so important to our lives and when we make purchase decisions. What is the role of trust in the world of commerce? So let's start big. Let's start with a definition of trust, because it's one of those words that we use a lot, but when you ask people to define what trust is, it's quite hard to get our heads around because it's not something that is hard. It's not even a brand attribute. Trust is a feeling. It's something that we feel towards people, towards companies, towards products and services. Now, I love the fact that trust is the most defined sociological concept in our lives. It has more definitions than love. And my definition of trust is really simple. Trust is a confident relationship with the unknown. A confident relationship with the unknown. And when you start to see trust through this lens, you start to understand why it's the foundation in our lives, why every purchase decision hinges on trust, why trust enables us to give our money, our data, information, try new things, trust products and services when we can't see how they're made. Trust is the very foundation of our lives and the social glue of relationships. And we're really going to dive into how it works and how you earn trust and what makes products, services, and people trustworthy. I thought, though, I'd start with a story because I've been studying trust now for over a decade, and it's always interesting to sort of ask yourself where this fascination came from. And I realized when I was writing Who Can You Trust, that for me, it started really early, that I had an experience when I was a child of giving my trust to the wrong person. So what happened was my mum decided when I was about 5 years old that she wanted to go back to work and that she needed to hire someone to look after my brother and I. So she placed an advert in this magazine called The Lady. Now this was in the early 80s where we didn't have email, we didn't have video conferencing, so she would rely on some written references and a phone call. And I'll never forget the day this woman walked into our lives, and her name was Doreen. And she came into our house, and we were living in London. And what I remember so clearly was that she was wearing a uniform, a navy uniform, and she had a bonnet. And for some reason, she was carrying a tambourine. Now, the reason why she was wearing this uniform was because she worked for this charity called the Salvation Army. And my mum said this was one of the reasons why she hired her, is that she told my mum that she loved helping people. Now, she lived with us for around 9 months, and I don't really remember anything strange about her. In fact, I remember her being quite cheerful and friendly. And then one weekend, she disappeared. And by Sunday, my parents start to really worry about what has happened to Doreen. So they go next door to our neighbor's house because our nanny was friendly with their nanny. And the neighbor's called Mr. Luxembourg. And he says to my dad, "It's so funny that you've come round this evening because I've just found out that your nanny and my nanny are running one of the largest drugs rings in North London." Now, you're going to have to trust me this is a true story because it is a true story. So now my parents are hoping that Doreen does not come home, and they go up to her bedroom and they find all kinds of things you really don't want in your house, and they discover that she's taken credit cards and she's stolen money, and there's lots of other things hiding under the bed. Well, a couple of days later, Doreen still hasn't returned, but there is a knock at the door, and it's the police. and they've come to arrest my dad because Doreen has taken our family's silver Volvo estate, our car, and she has used it as a getaway car in an armed robbery. Now, this is a dead true story, and I love to share this story to remind my parents that they left me in the care for 9 months of a drug-dealing, armed bank robber. Now, yes, this did give me a fascinating topic to study later on in life. But the reason why I'm telling you this story is it's actually a beautiful illustration of how we often make trust decisions, that we don't always give our trust to the right people and the right things. And one of the reasons for this is really because often we don't look for the right information. One of my favorite trust theorists is a person called Diego Gambetto, and he puts it beautifully. He says, trust has 2 enemies, not one: bad character and poor information. Now, the great thing in your world, looking after brands, looking at marketing, is that you can help with this. You can help give consumers better information so that we give our trust to the right products and services. So that's what I'd like to give you, is some principles of how we can help people make smarter trust decisions. How can we help people make smarter trust decisions? And the way we're going to do this is we're going to look at some pretty fundamental questions that we all need to be asking when we're thinking about our companies and the products and services that we're selling. So the first big question is, who can you trust? Clearly not Scottish Salvation Army nannies, but who can you trust? And to do this, I would like to run a quick exercise with you. And the way this exercise works is really simple. I would like you to pick one of these brands, Amazon, Uber, or Facebook, and I'd like you to pick the brand that you trust the most. Don't overthink it, and I'm going to say them out loud, and for the brand that you trust the most, I'd like you to clap really loudly, okay? So if you trust Amazon the most, clap really loudly now. Great. If you trust Uber the most, clap now. We have some Uber fans in the house, clearly. Okay. If you trust Facebook the most, clap now. I would love to ask this lady why she's clapping so enthusiastically, but I would call that tepid, right? Like, clearly some trust issues there. Okay, now you've got the idea. We're going to do it in reverse, and we're going to do it with politicians. Now, do you know it's remarkably easy to find photos of politicians eating ice cream, which I never knew. But the way this is going to work is I want you to pick the politician that you trust the least. No judgment. And it wouldn't be appropriate to clap, so you can boo very, very loudly. So, Biden, Putin, or Johnson, my prime minister. Okay, so if you trust Biden the least, you can boo really loudly. Boo now. Woo! Gentleman at the back. That was a good boo. I like it. Okay. If you trust Putin the least, you can boo now. It's a very different boo. Right. Okay, great. And you maybe only get one boo on this one, by the way. If you trust Johnson the least, you can boo now. Over here, right? Like it was collective over here. So why are we doing this exercise? It's actually a terrible exercise, asking someone who do they trust, who don't they trust. But it's often how we talk about it in life. Or when you read research, we don't trust media, and we don't trust government, and we don't trust this brand. We talk about trust in a really generalized way. And it misses something really important for trust to really become useful, which is to do what? Who can you trust to do what? You know, Amazon's really interesting. If I'd asked you, I think you're clapping because when you ordered something on Amazon, you trust that it will arrive the next day. But if I said, do you trust that Amazon treat their people fairly, or that they pay their fair share of taxes, you may have given me a really different answer. Many of you clap for Uber, and that's probably because when you press the app on your phone that you trust that a car is going to show up. But if I said you trust that they treat their drivers well, you may have given me a different answer. The leaders are really interesting because even that is contextual. It's often related to our relationship with them. Are we familiar with them? You know, I trusted Biden when he was vice president. I'm not sure how I feel about him as president. Johnson, I don't know. I trust him to throw a really good party. I don't know what I trust him for. And Putin, I'm really not sure, right? But they all have a context around which we can trust. So when we're thinking about our own companies, when we're thinking about products and services, we need to take trust away from this sort of generalized language, this generalized way of thinking, and bring it back into context. How do we rethink context around our products and services? Where do people trust our brands? And where do we fall short? And where could we improve? So trust is highly subjective and it is highly contextual. The second big question I want us to think about is the role trust plays in helping us to try new things. One of the things that we often don't think about is the relationship between trust, risk, and innovation. When, in fact, if trust didn't exist, we wouldn't be able to innovate. We wouldn't be able to try new things. Now, the way I visualize this, I should say I started my life as an artist, so you're going to see lots of little sketches trying to take these quite complex ideas and make them simple. The way I think about the way trust enables innovation, enables us to take risks, is an idea I call the trust leap. Now, what's interesting is when you look at all different situations in our lives, trust works in a very similar way. So when you're asking someone to try a new product, when you introduce a new policy, when you change a payment system, when you're suggesting a new restaurant, when you introduce a new customer service person, whatever it may be, there is an element of something unknown. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to move that person from the known. And what we know about human beings is they love the known. The known is where we feel safe. The known is what feels familiar to us. So we're asking someone to take a trust leap into the unknown. And in between the known and the unknown is this big sea of uncertainty. And what we see is the reason why people often don't try new products and services isn't because it's not a bad idea or isn't because of the technology, it's because they simply aren't ready to take a trust leap. So trust leaps, once you see them, you start to notice them everywhere. And they're not new to our lives, but they are being accelerated by technology. Trust leaps happen whenever we ask someone to take a risk, to do something new, or to do something differently. And the interesting thing in the pandemic is in many areas of our lives, trust leaps have been accelerated. So as you're very familiar with, payment mechanisms have been transformed over the last 18 months. In the UK, contactless payments are up 28%. And that is just in the last 12 months, our payment habits have changed. And the interesting question is, will that trust leap ever go back? You know, I went into a shop the other day and I went to try and pay with money, and it was, oh, I don't want your money, right? Like, I only want your phone or I want a card. And that's happened relatively quickly. I got to know the company Kry, which I know came from Sweden, a virtual health company. And I was really amazed when I first went online with the doctor how positive the experience was. I assumed that I wouldn't feel any kind of connection, but in many ways, that experience felt more personal than when I went into a physical office with my doctor at home. And then, of course, we've seen massive trust leaps reinvent industries. My first book was actually on the sharing economy, which I started writing about in 2008. And I remember going to regulators and going to investors. I remember giving a talk to Hilton and saying that this really small company called Airbnb was going to transform the travel industry. And I kid you not, people laughed at me. Trust leaps can change our behaviors and reinvent the way we shop, the way we travel, the way that we pay for things. And this really brings me to a really important point in the role of trust in commerce. That in any organization, in any marketplace, in any business, you have two currencies that are constantly flowing. And these currencies often are at tension. They often pull on one another. You have the currency of money. And of course, money is important. Money enables us to pay for things. Money enables us to transact. But there is another currency that we have to pay equal, if not more, attention to, and that is the currency of trust. And the way I think about it is that money is the currency of transactions, trust is the currency of interactions. And the more you want to interact with people, the more deeply you want to be involved in their lives, the more trust that you need. Every touch point, every interaction with a customer is an opportunity to earn or to undermine trust. Now, I would love for you to experience a little trust leap yourselves so that the next time you ask someone else to take a trust leap, you can think about this experience. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to play a very short game. So what I would like you to do is I'd like you to take out your mobile phones, just take out your phones, and I'd like you just to wave them in the air like this so I can see that you've all got them. I do not believe you if you're pretending you do not have a phone, by the way. So, okay. Now, I'd like you to give your phone, unlock it, by the way, unlock the phone. Right, and now I'd like you to give it to the person sitting next to you. It can be on your left or your right. I know some people are a bit distant, so this gentleman just reached behind. It's not a reason not to play the game. Excuse me. And I'm going to give you, you don't know what I'm going to ask you to do. You're all like playing with each other's phones. You have 30 seconds. It's just 30 seconds of your life. And you can do whatever you want with that person's phone. 30 seconds, okay? 1, 2, 3, off you go, 30 seconds. You got 10 more seconds. Okay. Shh. Wow, okay. You can give the phones back now. Right. Now, some of you, I do not want to know what you found on that person's phone. The lady is laughing away. Okay. Now, what's interesting is I can see all of you, which is wonderful. And some of you, you really didn't want to play, right? So you were like, it's a bit far to give someone a phone, or I'll just keep pretending I don't have a phone, or I'll just sit here and 30 seconds feels like a really long time, okay? And then there was a large group of you that you swapped phones, but it just felt really uncomfortable, right? Like, what am I going to find on that person's phone, right? And then there's a small group of you that I don't know what you were doing, tweeting, Instagramming, sending messages from that phone. You could do a lot, actually, in 30 seconds on that person's phone. And the reason I want you to experience this is because we often ask people to share a lot from their phones without thinking about the trust state that they are in. And trust states are a really powerful way to think about mindsets and behaviors. Those of you who didn't really want to play, and I get it, I wouldn't really want to play that game, are in a low trust state. You don't want to take that risk. You don't want to try something new. And then the people who are sharing messages and going straight into that person's phone, they are in a high trust state. And this is one simple exercise with this room to show you how we respond differently to taking all kinds of risks, particularly risks that involve something really personal and involve sharing some data and information. So this is really important. I've worked with companies and they do really complex market segmentation and user testing, but they rarely ask this question. What trust state is someone in? Because the person who's in a low trust state needs different information and different user experience, different kinds of support for them to take that risk to do something new. The person who's in a high trust state might be already ready to make a purchase. So what trust state is someone in?